Hey there, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the East to West Hunts podcast that takes you from tag applications to the rugged terrain of your next adventure. I'm your host, Alex Gruin, and today we're diving into the ultimate hunting frontier, Alaska. Joining me is a seasoned hunter named Matt, who spent years trekking through Alaska's wild landscapes alongside his brother and friends in pursuit of moose, caribou, bear, and sheep. Matt has built up a wealth of experiences, and today he's going to share it with us, along with some lessons learned, the gear that stood the test of time, and the challenges that come with hunting in one of the most remote places on Earth. Whether you're dreaming about your own Alaskan adventure or just want to hear some incredible stories, I think you're in for a treat today. So, Matt, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Excited
Yeah,
to be on.
no, I'm excited to have you on, man. I know Alaska is it's a big list item for a lot of people, and I know it's a little scary for a lot of folks. So I think it's going to be good because you can really level with everybody, but I think you're going to add a lot of experience and information for listeners and viewers. So looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, definitely, man. Give the most information I can.
Yeah. So let's dive right in, man. How did you end up hunting or going to Alaska in the first place?
So what kind of got it started for me was my brother. So my brother's in the military.
Okay,
Um, he left when I was 16, and I mean there was like an 8 year span we didn't do any hunting together at all. And after he did two bases overseas, and then one day he called and he's like, "Man, I got my next base and going to Alaska." And I mean, just from the moment we had that conversation, it was like, whoa, it's on, you
So
know?
so so that was a good moment then. Like he was excited.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were thrilled. He had picked and begged for that base. And when he got that one, it was just like, oh, this is it, man.
Got it. Okay. So familial ties there. So that was the tie with, because I know you've hunted it when you were telling me about this and we were talking about the episode. You're talking about. I know you've been there with friends, but your brother too, right?
Correct. Yeah. So my brother, originally is the one that went there.
Okay.
And then, I mean, as soon as he got up there, it was just like, we got to hit the ground running. We got to start hunting.
Got
And
it.
instantly, like the first year up there, I think he might have got there early spring. By June, I was up there with one of my buddies, Brian, and I
Okay.
mean, we were hunting bears within a couple months.
That's awesome. So how many times have you been out there now hunting?
So this past trip I just got back from, that was actually our 10th trip.
Jesus. Okay.
So
Wow.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
impressive. Okay.
yeah. He was in there up there for 8 years. And I mean, we tried to do at least one trip every year. A couple of years where we had draw tags, we did twice that year.
Okay. God, that's great. Yeah, so being that you are in the lower 48 and you're traveling to Alaska, what were your initial thoughts the first time going out there?
Yeah. I was definitely nervous.
Okay.
And granted, luckily the first time going up there, we didn't know what we were getting into. I didn't have any gear. I
Okay.
mean, so it wasn't
That's
like
not
a
good.
big, yeah, it wasn't like, how am I going to get all this stuff up there? It was more like, okay, I guess I'm going. How do I fly with a gun? How do I do any of this? You know?
Yeah. That,
And it was just a lot of learning.
that's probably one of the most common questions I get is like how difficult is it to fly with a gun? Because like if you've never flown with it, there is a concern of like what's this going to be like at the airport and
Right. Yeah, I remember actually calling. I live in Ohio and I had called Cleveland's airport and was like, "Hey, like I'm coming with a firearm." And that's not the way you want to start a conversation with TSA.
yeah.
They were like, "What?" Like, so that was a lesson
uh,
learned. And I mean, now that I've done it, now I could do it with my eyes closed. It actually
yeah.
really is so easy. It's scary, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, for viewers and listeners, this is a common one, but it is not difficult to fly with a gun. If you want to go over a quick synopsis, what does it take when you're flying with one?
So it's got to be in a case. It's got to be in a lockable case, and a TSA agent, they can't be able to get their fingers in the case. Basically, like they'll almost try to open it and make sure it's closed with the locks and the latches.
Mm-hmm.
You can have more than one firearm in a case as long as they're like sturdy in there. And then any ammo that you're flying with has to be in some kind of a packaging. Even like when I fly, I always just bring a fresh box of ammo so it's in the manufactured box, and I've
Mm-hmm.
never had an issue with that.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's my experience. It's always just go check in, bring it, got to open it to show it's unloaded. They give me the little signed paper,
Yep.
put it in my case, and that's usually it. Off I go, and then I pick it up wherever I'm picking it up. You know.
Yeah. Knock on, and then
So
you just go to oversized baggage or whatever, and
yeah,
it's usually there. Show them your ID sometimes, and
yeah. It's kind of funny because depending on the state and the size of the airport, that's always a big one.
yes,
Because sometimes I've had it show up on the conveyor belt in the real small airports, and you're
yep.
like,
I
what is going on?
yeah, I've had that happen once, and you're like, no way. Yeah,
Yeah, that happened to me in Wyoming a couple times, and I'm like, man, that's awesome. I can
yeah.
appreciate it. All right, so cool. So that's awesome. So you had 10 trips. You've gone multiple times. Have your trips gotten more difficult, or like have you gone further in? Do you always go to the same spots? What is that like going 10 times over?
So we've definitely gotten a little more. I don't know the word for it, but we've definitely gotten more engaged and a little more risky, really. I guess you should say. I mean, our first couple trips up there was like, hey, we heard from so and so that we might be able to find a caribou over here, and we only have to go a mile off the road, and it's safe, and we can make it back to the truck every night. Like
Uh-huh.
that's how it started. And then I mean, geez, this last trip we just did, I mean, we took ATVs 30 miles out, and then we were a couple miles out on foot. I mean, as we got more seasoned and experienced, I mean, just what we were doing completely changed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't recall this, but have you always gone like on your own, or have you guys done outfitted stuff too?
So we've never done like a guided hunt before, but we have used a transport service. So a transport service that we've used in the past, they're basically they transport you. They're not allowed to like assist you in the hunt. They can't help you process meat. They can't tell you where the animals are.
Right.
You essentially hire them to say, hey, we want to get dropped here with a float plane or with an airboat or with anything along those lines. So
Mm-hmm.
when we drew, my brother had a brown bear tag for Kodiak Island,
Okay.
and we also did a fognack elk. And both of those hunts, we had looked at the map on the zone we were allowed to hunt, essentially picked the lake and said, hey, we want to go here. And they'll drop you off and pick you up on that lake 10 days later. So
Got it.
we've used those a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good topic to talk about because I've only hunted Alaska once and I used a transporter myself, but those transport services can kind of be all over the place. So let's kind of talk about that. So one, how do you find the transporters that you're using? You don't have to bring up who you used or anything, but like how'd you go about finding them? And two, like with the ATVs and stuff like that, was that on this last one? Is that a transport service, or did you guys just like rent ATVs and figure out where you want to go?
So for this last one, and again, that's another perk of having my brother being a resident up there.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
throughout the years, like we've kind of built an arsenal. I mean, he has two ATVs, and then our other buddy that we do a lot of hunting with, he has a Can-Am,
Okay.
one of those six-wheel Can-Ams with like a little truck bed on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, those three machines together is what made us able to go where we went.
Got it. Okay. So that was not a transport service then.
No, yep, that one was all on us. And then as far as a transport service, that we've used them twice now. Both of those were float planes, and
Okay.
we actually used the same company out of Kodiak both times.
Okay.
Um, and as far as finding them, I want to say again another perk of my brother being up there, just word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had talked to I mean, you got the military guys up there, they all talk. I think he had kind of told some buddies, hey, I drew the tag. What do we do?
Yeah.
One of those deals.
Yeah, I mean, with my end and planning hunts and stuff like that, a lot of the flight in services are booked out for ages. So, you're always fighting on like, I mean, even myself, I think I'm on a wait list with a company for a fly-in trip. We've been on a wait list for 4 years, and the way that we get on is it's like a lottery. Like if one of our names was to be pulled out of a hat, then we get to go. So it's
Wow.
kind of funny. So obviously it depends on where you're going and what you're hunting, but with that, you guys didn't have any issues, like as far as like booking the transporter or having to do it years in advance.
So I forget the exact dates of everything with Alaska with the draw tags and whatnot, but so I know like when we pulled a Fognac, we were a little more seasoned because we had done the transport for Kodiak.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as he pulled that a Fognac tag, I want to say like the next day he called that transport service and was like, "Hey, we have the tag for a Fognac in this zone.
Yeah,
Can you slot us for this 10-day window?" And they were like, "Yup, you're in."
that's awesome. Okay, well, I'm sure we're gonna come back to that in some regard because I'm curious on a few other things, but obviously the family connection is huge. Not
Yeah.
everybody's gonna have that ability, so let's talk two different things, right? Because at the end of the day, I want the listeners and viewers to obviously get out of this, but what's the benefit of having your family connection there, and you can kind of go over that difference for somebody that doesn't have that.
So, I mean, right out of the gate, the biggest difference, if you have an immediate family member that's a resident in Alaska, a really cool thing that they do is like, so my brother's an immediate family member.
Hmm.
I can actually hunt anything without having to pay a guide. Like right
Yep.
now, a non-resident, and you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, a non-resident would need a guide for a sheep, a goat, a moose, a grizzly bear, and a muskox. And I might even be forgetting something.
Yeah. Yeah. So the big ones: goat, sheep, and grizz. Those are the big ones that go guided. Moose is still a little bit on the chopping block because it hasn't been definitively made, but a lot of people do go guided for moose because it's such a big animal, so difficult to get out.
Yeah.
So you need it, unless you're doing like a river float and you're going to get to a specific area. But even that, like at the end of the day, you still need somebody to pick you up or transport you or do something. Like you're going to need help in Alaska. Like that is the
A
moral of the
hundred
story,
percent.
you
Yes.
know? And that was the cool thing. Like I knew talking to you, I was like, this is going to be great information because this is what's daunting for a lot of people. Like when I'm talking to clients and we're talking for Alaska, I'm like, we got to talk about this. Like if you wanted to hunt in 2026, we would have had to have stuff like planned now in 2024, right? So it's almost like two and a half years we're talking about it because it's not easy to coordinate everything. I'm sure you could speak to that, right? As far as like how difficult it is to get into certain areas.
Yeah, Alaska's a difficult, in my opinion, I think Alaska is a relatively easy state to understand as far as getting the tags.
Yes.
And then like the nightmare starts once you get the tag and you're like, whoa, and you open up a reg book and you're just like, whoa, what is going on? What do I do? You know?
I love it. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Obviously, the podcast and myself, where tag applications is a big thing, right? It's my life, but jump into it. Give me your verse of tag applications and the ease of understanding it for Alaska.
So, and things seem to be kind of changing.
Yep.
When I first started going up there, caribou was like your go-to. It was like a non-resident could buy a caribou tag over the counter. I mean, you see guys renting U-Haul trucks and just bombing up to Dead
I
Horse
know
or going
exactly
out to the
where.
seas. Yeah. And I mean, and they're killing caribou. They're killing nice bulls. Caribou hunting is like, is my favorite hunt to do. It's
Oh,
a
that's awesome.
very,
Okay.
I love caribou hunting. But like I know this past year, even for residents, the caribou season was barely open. That 40-mile herd took a beating. Um,
Okay.
so like I think that's a drastic change that's kind of happening. I don't know what direction it's going to go, but I think it's going to be a lot harder. to hunt caribou in the future for non-residents.
So let's one off there. So you mentioned they're taking a beating. Can you give that a little bit more detail?
From what I know, I believe there was a big freeze and a big die off. I want to say 2 years ago. I think was when the herd really the numbers drastically went down.
Okay.
And I know this past year, so usually it's open like mid-August, and they'll open it with a quota and say when it's full, they'll do everything. They'll fly a plane over with a banner saying season closed in 24 hours. We've hit the quota. Like you call the hotline and they tell you like it's going to close, and then
Hmm.
that's it for that hunt. And then usually they open it back up for a winter hunt, kind of around right now. And like I know this year they didn't even open that winter hunt up for the residents because I mean just the herd is not in good shape, and
Yeah.
I want to say the quota for this year was only maybe a couple hundred.
Yeah. For the folks that live off the land, that's a tough pill to swallow too.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned caribou is obviously your favorite, but you've hunted multiple animals there. Any differences as far as like the applications, the drawing, so on and so forth for different animals there?
So we usually we love Kodiak. I think Kodiak is a beautiful area to hunt. Um, like that whole area, we really like to try to pull tags in there as often as possible. Not that we're very lucky, but we try.
Hmm.
Um, so we always party hunt. We always try for Kodiak brown bear.
Okay.
A fognack elk. A fognack elk is the hardest hunt I've ever done in my life.
Okay.
Um, we spent 10 days there in 2022, and we never even saw an elk there.
Hmm.
We killed a nice blacktail buck. We had me and Brian, since we're non-residents, we had deer tags. My brother had the elk tag.
Hmm.
We killed a blacktail buck and two does while we were there, but we never even saw an elk.
Nice. Well, not nice that you didn't see an elk, but congratulations for being successful. Regardless, I mean, having something down and having a tag in your pocket that you utilize is very nice. I guess it brings an interesting point up. So, like, explain to everybody, how easy it is to get certain tags and how hard is it to get other tags for a non-resident.
So for a non-resident, there's no preference points in Alaska. So every year you put in, everybody's got the same odds. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, like I personally like that because like that's why we all use you. Because I mean, you look at all the Western states and everything, and I mean, every time I look into it, I'm just like, oh man, I'm just gonna call Alex. You know, it's just Alaska is a state that I will gladly put in for the tags. It's pretty cut and dry and simple. It's
Yeah.
once you pull it when the work begins, like I said earlier. You know.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. I do like that system myself. I mean, I think there's a lot to do with points, don't get me wrong, but you know, any given year your name is just as good as anybody else's in there, and that's kind of nice. Like you just don't have to worry about, oh, I got to build up and when am I going to use these points and all of those other things. But I think if you have Alaska on your map, or obviously like yourself, you have somebody up there, that's such a huge benefit. But if you have Alaska on the map, like that is a definite one to know that you are pulling that lever anytime you're applying because you could draw at any point in time. Like when I hunted Alaska, I put in for muskox and I put in for caribou at the same time, and when I drew, I remember getting that email, but I actually thought I drew the caribou because my odds for drawing the caribou tag were like 10 times greater than the muskox tag. And then I looked at the code and I was like, that is not the caribou code.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is crazy. But it just goes to show like any year you throw in could be that year for you. So
Right.
that's
You
awesome.
drew a muskox tag then?
Yeah. Yeah, in
Oh, nice.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah. I hunted Alaska, and I actually came back like 3 days before everything shut down for COVID.
Okay.
So I really don't want to know what would have happened, but I really dodge something as far as like hunting over there and the travel and all that stuff. So
Yeah, you might have got a nice vacation being stuck up there for
I don't know.
a
Dude,
while.
I was going crazy. I don't know how you feel about it, but this is an interesting discussion point. When I was going up there, I had a buddy of mine that told me that I needed to go and get like anti-anxiety meds from a doctor. And I was like, for what? And he's like, oh, it's called island fever. And you ought to get it because you're gonna be real anxious if you're stuck in a very small area and you don't have a lot of stuff to do because it's not like your norm. So he's like, I would definitely go. And I was like, I don't need that stuff, man. Whatever. He was pretty spot on because I landed, I shot my muskox, and then I was stuck waiting for travel out with the weather, and there's nothing to do. Like once you're tagged
Right.
out, there's nothing to do. I literally was about to ask people to like put me to work
Yeah.
in town because I'm like I'm literally watching TV on their 10 channels. I have no cell phone service. I got really nobody to talk to, and I'm eating tomato soup. Like it's straight going crazy, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ready
So
to go home.
I'm ready to go home, and you're anxious about like when am I going to get out? When's the plane going to come? There's all these other things going on that I don't think a lot of people would ever think about, but it's cool to talk about that experience because, as you know, like I mean, the weather up there is no joke, you
Yeah.
know.
No,
So,
I think that's a good point to bring up to people. Like I always, every trip I plan, I always put 2 days at least of cushion on the front and on the back. Whether that be like the time off from work I'm taking, or like, hey, I'm gonna fly into Fairbanks and we're gonna catch the puddle jumper to get out to the bush or whatever.
yep.
Because you never know. I mean, I've told my boss before, hey, dude, I think I'm gonna be back this Monday, but if the
Hmm.
weather's bad, we might not be able to get our plane out, and I might not be back till Thursday or Friday that week.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like,
listen.
what?
Yeah, that's like that brings me up to 2 points because this is totally off topic, but like I remember having that same conversation and just about time, right? And it's like not everybody has 2 weeks to take off for work, right? But if you are going to make this trek, you probably need like realistically 10 to 12 days to make sense of it,
Absolutely.
But I remember doing it, and I remember I had an extra 2 days of buffer on the front, and I had one extra day of buffer on the back end. So I think I had like 9 days. It was 9 or 10 days I had planned out for like a 5 day hunt, and and then my wife was also like, hey, you also need to get a better insurance policy,
Yeah.
like a life insurance policy. If you
Yeah.
die, you know,
Yeah.
I can't be a widow and be broke, so I need to be
Right.
like one
Right.
or the other.
She needs something out of you.
That's the funniest conversation. I just started laughing. I was like, "Yep, I got you." Like I fully respect the fact that that could happen on one of these
Yeah.
little planes. So
Oh yeah. Yeah. You ever in them things, and sometimes you're just like, wow, I have no
dude,
control. Not
no
a
no
lick of
joke.
control. Who is this guy flying? What is going on here?
Oh man, it's so funny. So so do you feel like Alaska is as daunting of a place to hunt as you would think it is as like your first time going, or like for the person that hasn't gone there and in their mind obviously it's very daunting to think, man, I'm going to go hunt in Alaska. Do you think of it as daunting now?
I don't know that I think of it as daunting, but I definitely think there's like you have to have a respect for it.
Okay.
It is very it's a big place, and it's somewhere that like people get killed, people get hurt, like bad things happen up there every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you could go from like a enjoyable what your dream hunt to like a dangerous situation really, really fast.
Yep.
And I feel like you just have to have like a respect for it. But I mean, if you draw that line and you plan your trips and you go with people you trust, I think it could be an awesome experience, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, proof and point, you've been there 10 times, so it's got to be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't keep going back if we weren't having fun, you know?
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, you have to respect it. It's like respecting Mother Nature. and just weather period, right? I mean, it can change things, with a blink of an eye or a snap of a finger kind of a deal.
Yeah,
So,
I've been fogged in up there for 3 days straight before. I mean, that
okay.
fogged in, like open your tent, you can't see 50 yards, and you're like, what are we doing here? How
Hmm.
long is this gonna stay? Can we get out? Like, couple
Okay.
spooky,
So you mentioned gear. Let's talk some gear, right? I mean, everybody loves talking gear. I'm a total gear nut, so I'll enjoy hearing this. But you mentioned you went up there, you didn't have gear, and then you did what? You came back and just bought a ton of gear, or did you like piece it over the years? Like what was that
um,
like?
so our first year up there, it's funny because I got a picture. My brother has a picture of me, sitting over a hill glassing with like a pair of Walmart binoculars, wearing a metal pack frame that I thought was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen that he bought at a garage sale for $20. We're like, man, we're gonna pack something out on this. I'm wearing like Dickies work pants and like a zip up mossy oak whitetail jacket, and like we went out on a 5 day bear hunt. That was the first trip, and it was just like, whoa, this is eye opening.
Okay.
We had my brother's 16-foot like enclosed trailer that we built like bunks out of wood with and a Mr. Buddy heater in there. We were staying on the side of a road. I mean, we learned
Sounds
some hard
epic.
lessons. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, after we did it and we got the itch and we're like, whoa, we want to really get into this. That's when we ended up, we got deep into QU, looking at all of their different stuff. And I mean, I have an embarrassing amount of QU now. I mean, I
Okay.
have a room in my house full of it. I swear by it. Um, but yeah, just buying gear over time. I certainly didn't just swipe the credit card and buy everything I have. Just every year was like right out of the gate, like most important thing in my opinion, time and time again on a long trip is rain gear.
Yeah.
Was we need good rain gear, and then after a couple of years down the road, it was like, hey, we have good rain gear, but what would be better than good rain gear? Two sets of good rain gear, stuff like that. We just dialed in on over time.
Are you a Kuyu Yukon rain gear fan?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I have their Yukon, and then my backup set, which was actually my original set, was
It's got
the
to be the
Northridge.
Chugach. Oh, the Northridge.
The
Okay. All right.
Northridge, yeah, that was like my first, like, this is all I can afford. I'll
Yeah,
buy
that was
whatever
the
most people
intro. I
buy.
remember that line.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I have the Northridge as like it's just stuffed in the bottom of my pack at all times. Like it's like, okay, if something really goes south, I got this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the most important pieces. I know on any moose hunt in relation to that I've either worked on or talked to clients about. That's always the number one thing we talk about is rain gear up there because it
Yeah.
can rain for the whole time 10 days you're up there and you're just
Yep.
soaked.
Right. Another big piece that we like to run that's a game changer when we can, depending on how we're accessing or what area we're hunting. Like if we're not going far from a road or we have ATV usage, my brother has an Arctic oven tent. And I mean, those Arctic ovens, I don't know, you've probably stayed in one. They're a game changer. You can hang your clothes up in there, run a heater, and just it's like a little house.
You read my mind because that's exactly what I was going to ask you is what kind of tent are you using because I know you pretty much have to have some form of heat
Yes,
just to dry your stuff out for not even for the temps, but just for the fact of drying your crap out.
right. As far as getting warm, I mean, so like my sleeping system, I run Stone Glacier.
Okay.
I love their sleeping bag. I have their 0 degree bag. That bag has never let me down.
Mm-hmm.
But like as far as having heat in a tent, like you said, it's by no means getting warm is nice, but like absolute priority is let's get all this gear hung up and get it dry so when we wake up tomorrow, we're fresh and we're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the number one thing I always think about. If I think about Alaska, the three things that pop into my brain are waterproof, like everything, boots, tent. and like having a heat source. Those are my three, because I know that like if my boots aren't great, especially with that like real squishy terrain that you could be hiking in, because I know a lot of people don't realize how soft that ground can be, and if you're
It's
hiking
brutal.
miles in it, it's no joke.
Yeah.
You know, it looks not as punishing as it actually is.
Yeah. You don't realize how bad it is until you start walking and you get about 50 yards and you're like, wait, what are we thinking? We can't, that
Yeah,
stuff is, oh, it's an ankle breaker. It's unbelievable trying to walk across that stuff.
I love it. Okay, so what other gear would you say is like a must-have that you upgraded? Not necessarily something that you didn't have, but would you like upgrade to where now you're like, man, I couldn't live without it?
So a big thing we started doing is we always ran like cheaper our small tent. So when we set up, say we're setting up a base camp and we're gonna run our Arctic oven,
Okay.
we like to set up like a second tent, um, just as a dumping grounds to put packs in, to put anything we don't want getting soaked inside has always been beneficial to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then like on a smaller or a hunt where we're actually hiking in, we both run, all three of us actually run the QU little storm 2-person tents.
Okay, yeah, I have that
And
same
I
tent.
mean,
Yep.
dude, oh man, we've put those things through the ringer.
Yeah, I
And I
love that
mean,
tent.
oh, it's amazing. It is an
Yep.
absolutely amazing tent.
Okay. Yeah, that's I have both. I have the Mountain Star and the Storm Star. Actually, I have the Summit Star too. I'm definitely a Kuiu fan, but I also have the rental side of the business, so I have a bunch of stuff just for folks to rent. I will say though, there is another tent that is a really really similar tent that I really really like for folks that are listening. If you're in the market for a tent, the King's XKG tent is very similar to the Mountain Star. It's a little bit heavier, but a little bit more room in it, and that thing's pretty impressive for the money and very very similar to it. And I don't know about you, I actually I did a video, I don't know, a year or two ago on YouTube about the setup of the Mountain Star, but like I feel so stupid when I'm putting it together, but you know how it has the external frame to it.
Yeah,
It's the crossing of the membranes where it's like it crosses into the lock or the like the carabiner, and then it goes through to the other side. So like I like
yeah.
cannot compute the fact that it needs to go and cross on both sides, and then I always mess it up when I'm putting it up in the dark.
Yeah, if you don't remember that red, white, I have to say that red, white, and blue thing in my head like 30 times as I'm putting it together because I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Like,
Totally,
why?
totally.
I've had this tent for years and I still don't know how to put it together.
Well, and this year they put it together where they released the new model of it, and now they have it where the tent poles are still external, but they actually go through like a little sleeve, and the sleeves are even more confusing in a sense because the sleeve it goes in, but then it needs to go under the other sleeve, and if you don't do it, it doesn't allow the tent to pop out the way that it should. So I had a client that bought it, and we did 100 miles of a hike, and he bought that tent and he was testing it out for this season for hunting, and I was laughing because he had watched my video on it, and then he's putting it together. He's like, "Dude, I cannot figure out why I can't get this thing
Yeah,
up." And I'm like, "I'm telling you, it's the crossover of it, but I don't know your tent because I haven't put it together with the new frame. But I'm telling you, it has to do with the crossover." For half an hour, he's spinning his wheels. Finally, he figured it out. I needed to go cross the other way to get it to open up, and I just was like, "They still haven't fixed that issue." If
right.
anything, they made it
Yes,
worse. But that tent is so good.
right. Yep, that's what I tell myself every time I'm fighting it is like, this thing is awesome. I just need
Oh,
to
it's
get it
bomb
together,
proof, man. It is so
you
good. It's
know?
so worth the money.
Yes.
So cool. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So let's talk about some of your most recent successes in Alaska. Like, what would you say is your pinnacle hunt that you guys did out there?
I mean, we've had some really good hunts over the past years, honestly. This moose hunt that we just came off of was by far like the most rewarding as like our wow, we finally got a moose because we tried to do a moose hunt 2 or 3 years ago and it just didn't go that good. It
Okay.
turned into we moose hunted for that trip. I want to say we spent about 8 days looking for a moose.
Okay.
Um, After we were relatively close to Fairbanks, day 4 it was so bad that we actually drove back to my brother's house and watched some YouTube videos like how to find a
Like, what are we
moose. You
doing?
know, we're like something ain't right here. I don't know, man. And then we felt like we learned everything. We're like, okay, we're in. We're going back. You know,
Yeah.
went back out, I think we spent about 4 or 5 more days out there. My brother was sick as a dog. It was just a bad experience.
Oh, that sucks.
And then
Okay.
it turned into, well, let's grab the bows and head north. And I actually ended up killing a caribou, my first caribou with a bow on that trip.
Nice.
So we left with a win.
Okay.
Um,
So hindsight 180 now, you get to this moose hunt. What was like, I guess, give me the story to it. I mean, you made it sound like this was the best one.
yeah. So this moose hunt, 3 of us went. So it was me, my brother, and our good buddy Tom.
Okay.
Tom's also military. He lives up there.
Okay.
And he had moose hunted this spot for years. And way out here, he's telling us there's a public. So in Alaska, there's public use cabins throughout the state.
Okay.
And like a public use cabin it's a cabin on public land, like usually an old trapper's cabin or whatever. In the state, it's open. Anybody can go stay there. Anybody can use it. And
Mm-hmm.
you try to take care of it. You leave something for the next guy and hope that it
Yep.
just keeps going on forever.
Okay.
Um, so for years, Tom's been going out. He's been staying at this cabin. He goes, nobody's ever there. And we were laughing, planning this trip for months. I go, Tom, you don't know us, man. We got bad luck. Like, what if somebody's there? And we were just laughing about it. And he's like, nobody will be there. It's not even an option, you know? So we're riding out there about 8 hours into the ride. I'm noticing like there's fresh tracks on the trail. I'm
Of
like,
of a
where do you
person or
think
an animal?
of an ATV.
Oh,
So
okay. All right.
I'm riding shotgun in that Can-Am, and I'm just talking to him the whole time, giving him a hard time. And I'm like, where do you think this person's going? Because I got a feeling I know where he's going, you know? And he's like, no, there's no way. Like, he's going to be camped on the next ridge. Like, there's no way he's actually. Well, sure enough, we got to the cabin, and he was there, you know?
Okay.
So we see all their stuff there, and we're immediately like, "Oh man, this is bad." So we're like, "Well, it is what it is. They beat us fair and square. It's public land, you know."
Yeah.
So we actually decide, okay, we'll just keep going. We'll go a couple miles up to another ridge, and we'll just set up camp. Luckily, we had our tents and stuff with us as a backup, and
Yeah.
so we went about a mile and a half, 2 miles past that cabin, set up a camp. And we could see tracks, like, and it was like, man, these guys must be riding and hunting all over the place, you know? And sure enough, right before dark, they come riding through. There's a guy and his father, great people, super
Yeah.
good people, of course, like most of the people you meet when you're out there, you know?
Sure.
But it was a little standoffish, you know? It was like, they were like, what are you guys doing here? And we were thinking the same thing. So it was a little, you know. So yeah, we kind of make friends with them. We kind of told them like, hey, we'll be hunting here. We'll see you guys whenever we see you. And if you guys kill a moose or something, let us know because we're taking that cabin over if you leave, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. For sure.
And so yeah, day 1 we hunted hard all day. Beautiful weather. I mean, it was like not moose hunting at all. It was mid 50s or so, sunny outside. I mean, it was just like, oh, this is gonna be a breeze. This is nothing, you know. Like
Okay.
we're gonna have good weather.
Just jinxing
Um,
yourself.
yeah, you know, we had some hard lessons learned. We were like, once we start calling, we are not moving for 10 days because we're not gonna make the mistakes we made last year. Like when you moose hunt, you just wait. They're gonna come, you know.
Yeah.
So we had set up on this big saddle. There was a valley on either side, and we're like, there's got to be a moose somewhere down in here. Eventually, they're gonna come out. So day 1 was a good day, no moose. Day 2, we woke up just totally socked in. You couldn't see 50 yards.
Okay.
And then,
Just from fog?
yeah, just
Okay.
fog. And then it was just a nonstop rain. So we had a tarp. A big thing we do when we're up there is we always carry a tarp with us.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing big, just a little 12 by 12, and we'll tie it up to some sagebrush or whatever, just something you could put on like an angle to sit under it in glass and kind of stay dry, you
Yeah.
know? So we sat under that for 15 hours, just
Oh,
calling
geez.
every half hour
Okay.
and hoping that the next day was going to be better. Never saw anything day two. And that's when the morales, you know how it gets, the
Oh,
morale
yeah, dude.
starts going down.
It's a.
You're like, oh boy.
Isn't hunting the most emotional roller coaster ever?
Oh, it is, man. It is.
It's like depression, anxiety, happiness. Every I don't even know how to describe it. It just every bit of emotion comes
Yeah,
riding in a hunt.
it really does. And that's why we're addicted. That's why we all do it, you know?
Totally,
I don't know
totally.
another sport you could just be like this and then just immediately the worst day of your life to the best day of your life, you
That's
know?
so spot on. That's so spot
Yeah,
on. And it changes like that, right? Like you
in
go
a
from the
second.
pits to the best thing or vice versa.
In a second, yeah.
So anyways, yeah,
So,
day two, you didn't see anything. What else?
yes, day three, same weather, same miserable. And we're looking at on our Garmin, on our inReaches, you know? And we're seeing that day, like the weather's going to break. We're going to get, the following day was going to be good, and then it was going to go to shit again. So we're like, okay, we're going to get one good day of weather. Like, let's take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and keep in mind, we're still calling every half hour. We're like, something could still come in. Like, we're not out of the game. It could
Yeah.
happen.
Are you guys
Um,
raking on trees and stuff too?
yeah, so we're raking in the mornings and in the evenings, and then just throughout the day we're cow calling every half hour. Maybe not like in the middle of the day,
Mm-hmm.
but for 4 or 5 hour window in the morning and 4 or 5 hours in the evening.
Okay.
Just cow calling every half hour and hoping for the best, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and Tom both had grizzly tags in their pocket, and I had a black bear tag, and we're like, yeah, maybe we'll see a bear, you know. Like there's a couple different things that could happen out here.
Uh-huh.
Um, So it's probably 8 o'clock at night that night, and I mean we're defeated. You know, we're like this is not gonna work. It's gonna be another year. You know, we're
Yeah.
joking. We're asking Tom every 10 minutes. Tom, are we gonna see a moose or what? Like what's going on? Like he was telling us we were gonna see so many moose. Like this was the holy grail of spots. And so yeah, it's like 8 o'clock, and we just kind of got to the point where we're like, man, maybe we should just call it. Let's just crawl in the tents, go to bed, and we'll try this again tomorrow. The weather's going to be good. Let's be well rested. Let's hit it tomorrow. You know.
Yeah.
So we're laying in our tents. We go in. We're laying down, and within 10 minutes, I could hear Tom snoring. He's out. He is done deal out. Um, and I started to hear something, but I wasn't. It wasn't registering in my head that it was a moose. I remember hearing something and being like, man, I wonder what that is. It almost sounded like a bear, like huffing. And
So
I
it
was
was
like,
close to your tent?
it was on our hilltop. It was definitely like, I remember thinking like, that's not very far away, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're in danger. And I feel like I was in that like half asleep state, you know?
Okay.
So it was doing it maybe it felt like maybe every couple minutes. You know what I mean? I would just kind of hear something. And
And
then at one
is
point,
it still daylight at this point? Because I know the days are totally different.
it's yeah, so it's like dusk.
Okay.
It's still if it wasn't foggy, yeah, it would be almost totally light.
Okay. Okay.
It was getting dark about 9:45 ish, I'm gonna say. Um, so yeah, it was still pretty light. It wasn't even we're talking it's maybe 8:30 at this point.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I heard something and I was like, now that was a bull grunting. And I was like, and it's funny because earlier in the trip Tom had made a joke like we're gonna call a bull right into camp. Like it's happened before. And we were joking. I was like, I'm gonna make some slutty cow calls. I'm gonna call them right to the door of my tent, you know.
I
And
love it.
yeah. So when I heard that bull grunt, that's when I was like, oh man, that's actually a moose. Like, what do I do? Can I wake these guys up? Can I wake them up, or should I not make noise? Like, I don't have the
Hmm.
tag. I'm not. What you know?
Yeah.
Um, So, but then luckily I heard my brother. He said Tom's name first. He didn't answer. Then he said my name. And as soon as he said my name, I could hear him unzipping his sleeping bag. And I was like, is that a moose? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. So like I'm unzipping my bag and I'm unzipping my tent. And as I'm unzipping my tent and like stick my head out, my brother, I can see him. He's still in his sleeping bag. He's got his sleeping bag like up to his waist, and he's like on a knee hanging out of his tent.
That's
And I,
epic.
and I, I look up and I see the moose, man. He's just doing the wobble, just like totally rutted out wobble, walking straight to our camp. He's probably 80 yards or so from us.
Oh man. All right.
And I feel like I'm looking at this thing for 10 seconds and my brother still hasn't shot. And anybody who knows me and my brother, we argue, you know. So
Sounds about right.
um
That's okay.
yeah, I'm instantly I'm like, Dan, shoot him. What are you doing? Shoot him. And then I hear him rack around. And I'm like, that's weird. Why wouldn't this kid rack around before he came out of his tent?
Yeah.
And finally, then all of a sudden, I mean, he learned how to shoot real quick. He lit off 2 rounds within like 2 seconds, just bang, bang. And it happened quick.
Yeah.
And he turns around, he goes, my gun didn't go off on that first shot. And we're like, oh man, holy cow. And the moose had hit the ground. So
Okay.
like, we're hugging, we're high-fiving, like moose on the ground. Tom comes blasting out of his tent. Like, he's got, he's got his rifle in his hand. He's like, what's going on? Like, what, is it a bear? What's going on? Like freaking out. And we're like laughing. We're like, Tom, we just got a moose. We got a moose. Like, dude, we're hugging, we're high-fiving. And he's like, where? And Dan was like looking around for his binocular harness because it had more ammo in there. He wanted to reload.
Okay.
So he just kept saying, where's my bino harness? And I point like that. I go, right there, like to show Tom where the moose was. And the thing's standing up. And I'm like, oh man, he's up. I'm like, Dan, he's up. You got to get him again. And it was all happening so fast. We're all in our long johns, just like
Yeah,
running
I get
around
it. It's
chaos,
perfect timing.
Yeah. And then he actually ended up taking Tom's rifle from him and putting him down with his rifle.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
that was yeah. And
I can
then
only imagine the fiasco because like the way you're describing it, I know this is like a minute's worth of stuff,
yeah,
right? And it's like everybody's in chaos mode because you just want to take advantage.
yeah. It was total. It went from like morale's at an all-time low, everybody's asleep, to like just cloud nine. Oh my, we actually killed a moose. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
insane. And then after, like, then we're all celebrating and we're like, man, this is awesome. And then we're like, well, wait, now we got a dead moose.
I'll pack that
Like,
thing out.
yeah, yeah, and it's 70 yards from our tents. It's getting dark and we're in Grizz country. Like,
Yeah.
this is dangerous now. And you can't see because of the fog. Like, we had our headlamps on and you couldn't see. I mean, it got bad.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually ended up calling, or using our inReach to message the guys at the public cabin. And
Oh,
we're like,
okay.
hey, yeah, we're like, hey, you're not going to believe this, but we just killed a moose. It's like right on top of our camp. Could we come stay with you tonight?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the guy was awesome to us. He was like, yeah, absolutely, come on over. And I mean, dude, it was an awesome experience. We went over there, hung out with them, and had a
Yeah.
beer and hung out till midnight and
Made some
got our
new
moose in the
friends and
morning. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
so did you guys gut that moose and leave it, or did you guys like not touch it, or did you actually like break it down and leave it there? What was the scenario?
So we didn't even touch it.
Okay.
We literally were just like kind of in a panic mode with that
Mm-hmm.
fog and how dark it was getting. Like, we were like, we went off, we saw it, we're like, man, this is awesome. We're high five. Dude, we had figured we were gonna shoot a spike. You know what I mean? We
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
no intentions of like actually killing a good moose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, then once that fog and everything set in, and we were like, should we start now? Should we not start now? It just turned into, hey, let's just get back to the cabin, like wait for the daylight to come out. The fog shouldn't be here tomorrow, and we'll have all day to process this thing in the
Yeah,
light in a safer condition.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that the grizzly bear thing is no joke, and especially when you put an animal down, it's dark and you can't see. Like that's a recipe for disaster. So I fully respect what you guys did there. Did Did that breakdown then the next day take a long time? Was it longer than you expected, or was it less? What's the scenario there?
So we had done, so me and my brother, we'd never even been a part of a moose kill before.
Okay.
Tom had, I believe Tom's been around one or two before, so he kind of had an idea like, hey, he had a winch on his Can-Am, like we could
Mm,
use this to lift a leg and do this and that. Um, Took us about 5.5 hours to totally break it down and have everything loaded up essentially.
okay.
Because in Alaska, a big thing in Alaska is like wonton waste. Like
Yep.
I mean, we had to cut the ribs out whole. When it comes to processing meat in Alaska, you have to be like very specific of not wasting anything, you
Yeah,
know?
and you can't debone it either. You have to take everything with bone.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that that always is just such a game changer. People, you don't think about that, but especially with a moose, like a hind quarter of a moose is a big deal, and then to have to haul it out with a bone is just it's a lot of weight, man.
Yeah. One hind quarter of that moose was 155 pounds
Yeah, that's
with the bone.
insanity. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insanity.
Yeah. It was a
So
lot of work.
were you the strong man that packed out one whole ham hock by yourself?
No, I'm the weak link, man. The only reason they bring me on trips is because I can fix stuff. I'm not the pack mule at all.
Hey, at least you
Um,
serve a purpose.
yeah, that's my purpose.
Oh my god,
Um,
that's epic.
yeah, I could fix stuff or build something for them, but as far as that's about it, man. I'll pack, but I'm definitely not the biggest, heaviest pack.
Yeah, listen, 150 pounds is no joke.
No,
Because even for myself, I mean, I'm 180 pounds. I'm fit, but I'm not muscle man either. I try to keep my pack like 80 pounds. Probably is where I limit out,
yeah,
and that's purely just because I know I can pack the weight, but it's also like how destructive is that on my muscle for the next time that I got to go pack out, because if I'm packing out like an elk, for example, if I'm solo and I got to do 4 trips, like it's a lot, and for a
oh
moose,
yeah,
I know a lot of guys that won't kill a moose if it's not within a mile of where they're staying because of just how hard it is. And then two, that terrain we were talking about how soft some of the ground is, with the moss and other vegetation changes the game of how difficult that is to haul that weight and it's unstable on you and all that jazz.
yeah.
So
I mean, I've packed caribou. Me and Brian shot two bull caribou a couple years ago, and we packed them 7 miles.
yeah, that's
But
crazy.
like a moose, I wouldn't kill a moose more than 100 yards from where I can get a vehicle. I mean, after seeing one of them things, I couldn't even imagine. I could not. We were so lucky to be able to just load it in a Can-Am and off to the races. I
Yeah,
mean, to pack one of those, and hats off to anybody that's packed a moose because those are big.
yeah, dude, that's awesome. That was a great story. Like
Yeah,
that
it was a
was
good
awesome.
hunt.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was a great story. So, any takeaways that you would say for viewers and listeners? What's your like two top takeaways for somebody that wants to hunt in Alaska from your experience?
I mean, I would say top two biggest things for Alaska, man, is like you gotta, I mean, like I said before, you gotta respect it. It's a big place and some gnarly country. Like, I remember my first time going up there, is sitting and looking at a mountain and telling my brother over and over again, like, I don't think we're in the right spot. We gotta go to the other side. Like,
Yeah,
the other side's gonna be better. Well, I can tell you, it takes 8 hours to get to that other side, and when you get there, it looks like the side you were just looking at.
yeah,
Like, it's not. I grew up like all of my experience hunting was whitetail and turkey in Ohio. So
mm-hmm.
like when I finally got somewhere, I learned like, whoa, I can go wherever I want. You're telling me I can go cover all of this? Like the first thing I wanted to do was just run off as far as I could and cover ground and look like the guys on YouTube, you know? But once you start doing it, I feel like there's like a really big reality of you can't you shouldn't do what you really want to do, if that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, Yeah, and you're saying that for safety purposes?
Yeah, safety. I mean, overwork yourself. I mean, what are you going to do
Yeah.
if you actually killed something that far out? I mean, you have to get that animal out.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you could get in way over your head really fast.
It's huge. That's a great takeaway. Okay. So that sounds like your primary one. Any other additional good pieces of advice?
Yeah, have good friends. I mean, hunt with people you can trust. Like I know I hunt with people that like I can trust if I broke my leg or if I was in dire need of help. Like I like to hunt with people that I know have my back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just somebody, and then somebody I can trust to like, hey, if we're in a bad situation, he's going to carry his weight. He's not going to give up because giving up isn't an option out here.
Yeah.
Whatever cards you're dealt, you got to play them, you know?
Yeah, man, that's spot on. Well, I guess that has something to do with you too, right? Because Mr. Fixer Upper over here, somebody's trusting
Yeah,
you too, so you can't be too bad at whatever you're bringing to the
right,
table.
right. Yeah.
I love it. Well, awesome, man. I really loved this episode. This was awesome as far as like the information, the storyline, and just the takeaways. Because you know, in reflection of all of your experience and anything else that I've talked with clients and whatnot over the years, like it's very daunting. People are very scared is a good word. There it's just it's a scary thought. It's almost like the fear of the unknown, right? You get that like queasy feeling in your stomach about, man, I really would want to do it, but I really don't know all that it takes, and it kind of keeps people out of there. So not saying everybody should go do it, but I do think there's a aspect of like it can be done. You just need to have the right, you need to have all of your ducks in a row in order to do it right. So I think it's a key message for it. So I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks so much for the time today. It was awesome. We'll have to have you on again down in the future. I'm sure you got some more great hunts coming down the pipeline here. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it was fun. It was fun. It's my first podcast. It was kind of fun to do, man.
That's good. That's good. Well, we'll put some closing messages on this, but thank you to the listeners and viewers for chiming in and listening and having a good time with us. Really appreciate it. Hope you get something out of this. A great episode. A shameless plug on my own as far as if you are interested in getting some tag applications or talking about your own hunts in the future, please comment or send me a note or go book a time on the website at www.eastowesthunts.com. You can also go on Instagram. There's pretty much every avenue out there as far as getting in contact with me. So just utilize one of them. But let's talk about it and let's set you up for success in 2025, 2026, and so on and so forth. Aside for that, hope everybody has a great night and we'll see you on the next one. And most importantly, remember to scout, hunt, and repeat. See ya.